Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. So hello everyone, welcome to Dharma Bum Basics. So tonight's topic, we'll be discussing kind of exploring the 5 hindrances using right effort. So that's going to be tonight's topic. I'll go over all 5 hindrances after the meditation, but for right now I'd like to kind of single out one of them that we may be experiencing quite a bit of right now. This is restlessness and remorse, or anxiety and remorse. It's something that can very easily come up when we're cooped up all day. So anxiety and remorse is this quality of having too much energy. When the mind has too much energy, it goes for a run, and it either runs to the future and becomes anxiety, or it runs to the past and becomes remorse. So it's this quality of the mind being over-energetic, frantic. So the meditation that we'll do tonight, it'll be very similar to last week's meditation, but it'll be slightly different in the sense that it will be targeting, kind of directly targeting this hindrance of anxiety and remorse, looking at kind of lowering the mind's energy level, getting it to settle down a bit. So with that, we will get started. If you're on a chair at home, helpful to have the feet flat on the ground. Maybe not fully utilizing the backrest, especially if it's a very comfortable chair. Tongue can be pressed up against the roof of the mouth, gently against the back of the teeth, prevents the buildup of saliva, which can be distracting. And then I like to kind of just imagine a string pulling the crown of the head up and then bringing the shoulders up and back and relaxing down into that really sturdy posture. And with that, we'll get started. Closing the eyes and taking 3 deep breaths slowly. Noticing if deep breathing feels good in this moment. And if it does, you can keep on breathing in this way. If it doesn't, switch things up. Maybe even deeper still, or more shallow, faster or slower. Or you can pose the question in the mind, what kind of breathing would feel the most calming and centering for the body? And just watch how the breath responds. When you found a rhythm and texture of breath that does feel good, you can let go of it a little bit and let it continue on its own, not forcing anything. And gently placing your awareness at either the base of the nose, the center of the chest, or the center of the stomach. And as you breathe in and breathe out, allow your awareness to stay right there at that spot. So you may feel the in and out breath, but you don't go along with it. You stay in that spot all the way through the in breath and all the way through the out breath, like a post in the ocean. The waves may come in and out, but the post stays where it is. You may notice your awareness drifting off from this post. And when you do, there's no need to force it back. You can just come back gently. And reestablish this post in the ocean. Once the mind has begun to calm down a bit, you can expand your focus from that single point, noticing if there's any tension in the forehead, around the eyes, or in the shoulders, and just consciously relaxing it. If you want, you can imagine the breath flowing through the tension, dissolving it away all the way through the in-breath, keeping it relaxed all the way through the out-breath. Breathing into the chest, softening any tension or tightness there. Gently sinking down into the stomach and doing the same. Allowing the breath to flow down the legs, dissolving tension all the way through the in-breath, all the way through the out-breath. Giving special attention to the legs as anxiety and restlessness tend to correspond to tension in the legs. And you can imagine the breath flowing down the legs and out the feet, deep into the earth, relaxing tension. Then we can continue working the breath through the body, downward. So as you breathe in, the breath flows down the head and down the rest of the body and out the feet. And as you breathe out, it flows down the body and out the feet. Just continually flowing downward, washing tension away, washing anxiety away. And if you find yourself getting drowsy, you can do the opposite. The breath comes up through the feet, through the body, and out the head. So just playing with these two perceptions to adjust the energy level in the body. And when you found the right level of energy, instead of flowing up or down the body, you can imagine the breath coming in from all directions as you breathe in, nourishing the body, and radiating out from all directions as you breathe out, settling into the moment. You can think of it as breathing in through the pores if you want. Maintaining this relaxed, full-bodied awareness. Gradually opening the eyes and beginning to stretch if necessary. Never in a rush to leave the meditation. So if anyone would like to share how that experience of meditation was for them, or if you have any questions about the instructions or anything, you can leave a comment in the live chat. And I'll check them. I'll check the live chat near the end of the class. Or if you just want to share your experience for anyone else who's watching. So with this topic tonight of the 5 hindrances, I thought it'd be a useful topic because as it is now, a lot of us are stuck with ourselves a lot more than we'd like to be. So we have a really good chance to notice these hindrances in our day-to-day. Because when we're going throughout our days and we're getting to do lots of different things and go lots of different places, the hindrances tend to be pretty content. But when we're stuck in the same routine for a period of time, the hindrances start to show themselves, start to make themselves very apparent. So I'll go over these hindrances. The hindrances are basically the main mental qualities that cause distraction in the meditation and that also tend to contribute to a not as pleasant life. So the first one, often translated as sensual passion. I'm not a big fan of that translation because it seems limiting. When people hear sensual, they think of only certain things. I prefer sensory passion because that's actually what it means. Any kind of passion in terms of the senses. Sight, sound, smell, taste, tactile sensation. So sensory passion is the obsessive and neurotic fantasizing about fulfilling sense pleasures. It's not necessarily the fulfilling of the sense pleasure or the object of the sense pleasure. It's more about this obsessive planning about how we're going to get it and how good it's going to be, and just all these kind of layers upon layers that we pile on top of things with expectation. And then inevitably, if we're actually lucky enough to get that thing that we were fantasizing about, it can never live up to the fantasized version of it. It's never as good as we pretended it could be. So it's this obsession is sensory passion. It's not saying don't desire anything or don't want anything. And it's not saying that getting pleasure out of something is bad. It's referring to this obsessive, neurotic anticipation, planning, and manipulating to try to get what we want. Is more of what sensory passion is referring to. So that's the first hindrance. The second hindrance is ill will. Ill will is pretty straightforward. It's wishing for someone else to suffer or someone else to be deprived of something. You can also think of it as anger. So it's a pretty straightforward one. And sometimes, because ill will or anger can sound kind of intense, but something as simple as when someone says something rude to you and you want to say something rude back, that's you wanting to cause them harm, and that's ill will. So it might seem like this petty little thing, but it actually is ill will manifesting itself. The next is, this was actually brought up in Jeff's class on Tuesday. The next one is sloth and torpor, or laziness and lethargy. So sloth is physical drowsiness. Maybe you're just it's that laziness. You just kind of don't feel like doing anything. And then torpor is more of a mental dullness. Like maybe you're not getting enough sleep, so the mind's not functioning optimally. So in both cases, it's a quality of not having enough energy, having a lack of energy. The next hindrance is anxiety and remorse, which we kind of targeted in that meditation there. It's a quality of having too much energy. And as I mentioned in the beginning, when the mind has too much energy, it either runs to the future and becomes anxiety, or it runs to the past and becomes remorse. Getting hung up on everything that could happen, getting hung up on everything that did happen. So that's a fun one to have to deal with. And then the final hindrance is doubt. This mainly, it can refer to self-doubt too, but it mainly refers to doubting that this meditation practice is actually worthwhile, or that it actually gives results, or doubting that we have the capacity to get the results out of this practice. So I'll go into some ways of dealing with the hindrance in a minute, but I'd like to share some imagery that I find helpful. I really like the Buddha's use of imagery in a lot of stuff. With the hindrances, he compares each hindrance to a bowl of water. And then, so you have a bowl of water, and then you have some kind of object in the water. So the object, for the sake of the example, would be the same in all of these. But with sensory passion, it's like looking at an object in water that has dye in it. So the water is colored red or blue or whatever. So we can still see the object, but it's colored through the lens of our preferences. We're not seeing it as it really is. We're seeing it with our interpretation piled on top of it, or our desires piled on top of it. So we're seeing it through this kind of like the expression rose-colored glasses, seeing things as better than they actually are because of our fantasy about how they should be or how they would actually be. And then the next one, ill will, is like having a bowl of water that's boiling. And when the water is boiling, you can't see clearly in it at all. You can't even make out what kind of object's in it. And this is why the Buddha considers anger or ill will something unskillful, because it clouds the mind and prevents clear seeing. When you're angry, maybe you feel like you could get more stuff done, or you're more motivated to get things done. But an example I heard, I'm not sure where I heard it, but I really enjoyed it, is that anger can pull if you're doing archery, anger can pull the bowstring back, but it can't aim. So it may give you the drive and the energy, but typically you end up shooting yourself in the foot. Then the next one with sloth and torpor, is like water that has algae grown over the surface of it. The water has been so stagnant, it's lacking any energy in it, so you can't see anything in it. It's too murky. Just like when we're overcome with sloth and torpor, we'll see things in a lens that's beneficial for that hindrance. So when we're overcome with sloth and torpor, we'll see something, maybe a simple task, and the mind will make it out to be this impossible task. Something as simple as, let's say, doing the laundry. If you're overcome with sloth and torpor, the laundry seems like climbing Mount Everest. But if you're able to keep your energy up, it's not a big deal. Then the next one, anxiety and remorse, is like a bowl of water that has wind skirting over the top of it. Everything's in too much motion, too much of a panic to really see clearly what's going on. And then with doubt, it's like a bowl of water in the dark. Can't make anything out because you're not sure what you're looking at. So I just really like that imagery. It kind of helps me reinforce what those hindrances are, helps me keep them in mind. Because these hindrances are pretty much everything that we'll be dealing with that's kind of an uncomfortable thing in the mind. Sometimes it's a mix of hindrances, sometimes it's one dominant hindrance. But pretty much any kind of distraction that you can think of either fits into one of these 5 categories or is a combination of these categories. So it's something really helpful because we can get trapped in kind of the nuance of it all and how complex emotions can seem, how complex distractions can seem. But when we have these 5 hindrances, this list, we can just kind of go through it, ask ourselves, what is this? What category would this fall under? And when we can identify what kind of category it falls under, we can then identify some tools that are useful for working with it. And at any time that you have any questions about the talk or anything like that, if you could leave it in the live chat, any questions pop into your head or anything, I'll answer them at the end of the class. So these hindrances that come up in the mind, when we keep in mind the tools that work with them, we're able to more appropriately address them. And this gets into right effort. Right effort in the simplest sense is generating a willingness to abandon unskillful qualities of mind, unpleasant qualities of mind, and generating a willfulness to develop skillful and pleasant qualities of mind. So for tonight's purpose, we're talking about kind of this uprooting of unskillful, unpleasant qualities, mainly the hindrances. So one thing I'd like to say about right effort is right in 2 senses. One, it's that it's the appropriate amount of effort for the task at hand, being careful not to overcomplicate simple solutions. You don't always need to bring a scalpel to a problem. Sometimes a hammer will do. So it's this gauging how much effort's actually needed so you don't strain yourself unnecessarily. And then in the second sense, right effort is right because it's appropriate for where you're at in your practice in that moment. So some of these hindrances or some of these this trauma associated with some of these hindrances can prove difficult and sometimes even harmful for someone who's newer to working with the hindrances, of being able to uproot. Sometimes we have to, when something comes up in the mind, we have to acknowledge whether or not we're currently capable of working with that. And there's no shame in if we don't yet feel we have the tools to work with it. There's no shame in that. That's just where we're at. So to maybe shelf that and come back to it later after some more practice. So it's this quality of being able to, oftentimes the Buddha uses the image of a lute, or you can think of just a guitar. And right effort is the hand that's tuning the guitar. And if the guitar is tuned too tightly, the strings will snap. If it's tuned too loose, no music will play. So right effort's about finding the appropriate amount of effort and the appropriate approach to each situation. So with that, I'll talk a little bit about some of the more general things that can help with some of these hindrances. So with sensory passion, 3 of the things that can really help with it. One is but if we actually look at it impartially, we contemplate the drawbacks. Oftentimes we find the drawbacks outweigh the benefits. But it's only when we have this quality of stepping back and actually looking, taking a pros and cons table. The other is moderation in food. To not constantly overeat, because one of the main sensory passions that people struggle with is taste, is food. So if you find yourself really struggling with sensory passion, moderation in food can be helpful. And then the last one is guarding the senses, meaning not exposing yourself to things that you know will tend to rile you up or tend to get you obsessive. Kind of going back to the food example, if you are trying to be healthy, but you're constantly tuning into like Food Network when they're making cakes, maybe that's not the most helpful. So guarding the senses, acknowledging that that's not the best thing for you in the moment, and that it has those consequences. With ill will, the best solution to ill will is loving kindness, which Alex led a beautiful meditation on that last night. You can go check that out on the YouTube page. Loving kindness with Alex was really good. With sloth and torpor, the interesting thing is both with sloth and torpor and anxiety and remorse, exercise helps with both of them. So with sloth and torpor, if you don't have enough energy, regular exercise starts to build up your energy. And with anxiety and remorse, if you have an excess of energy, exercising right before the meditation gets rid of a lot of that excess energy. Also with sloth and torpor, it's a good idea not to eat right before a meditation. With time, you may notice that if you eat and then try to meditate, you're much more likely to fall asleep than if you meditate on an emptier stomach. Another thing that can help with anxiety and remorse is forgiveness meditation, which we'll probably do next week. It's one of my favorite styles of meditation. So next Thursday, we'll probably do forgiveness meditation. And then with doubt, the thing that helps the most with doubt, in my opinion, is consistent daily practice. I know it wasn't just a quick solution, but consistent daily practice is the best way to overcome doubt, because consistent daily practice is pretty much the only way that you're going to start to notice the full benefits of a meditation practice. Meditating once or twice a week is a beautiful thing, wonderful, but it tends not to overflow into the rest of our day on a regular basis unless we're doing it on a regular basis. Jeff always says we're not meditating just to be good meditators. We're meditating to kind of handle our lives more appropriately. So consistent daily practice helps with doubt, and so does keeping a journal of your consistent daily practice. Being able to look back on the way you used to see things versus the way you see things now. Because with incremental change day by day, it can be harder to notice, but when you have a journal to reference back to, progress begins to kind of show itself. So with that, I'll move on to questions. So how do you face a hindrance that you've noticed in yourself, but without judgment? And how essential is meditation to your daily life? I like these two questions because they kind of go hand in hand. So how do you face a hindrance that you've noticed in yourself without judgment? So I'd like to make a difference between judgment and discernment here. So judgment is noticing something and then piling stuff on top of it. So you notice say the hindrance is laziness, right? You notice, I have a tendency to be lazy. Noticing that you have a tendency to be lazy is making a discernment. But then on top of that discernment, if you get into, man, I'm so lazy, I can't believe I'm such a lazy person, how can I even deal with myself, and all of this other kind of stuff that you're piling on top of it, that's when the judgment starts. So oftentimes people might think of being like without judgment as just kind of being passive and letting things come and go. But there is an element of discernment. The word prajna, which is typically translated as wisdom, can also mean discernment. So there's an element of discernment in practice, being able to determine things. So how do you face a hindrance without judgment? You face a hindrance without judgment by facing it with discernment. So you discern that there's an issue, in the case of laziness. And then you follow up with a contemplation of not getting into the story of it, but just into a contemplation of how can I overcome this laziness? Or what are some steps that I can take to overcome this laziness? And of course, these hindrances, so when you're consistently practicing this, you notice this laziness, you make the discernment, laziness has arisen. It's another important factor to not identify with it. It's not, I am lazy, it's laziness has arisen. It can be helpful to kind of treat the hindrances as almost a separate person piling their opinion onto you or their preferences onto you. So it's laziness has arisen. And then what are some steps I can take to lessen laziness? What are some daily steps I can take? So you just you lay this out, and there's no need to feel bad about yourself. You can remind yourself that these 5 hindrances are listed out because they're what pretty much everyone struggles with. It's not unique to struggle with laziness. It's not unique to struggle with anxiety or sensory passion or ill will or doubt. This is something that every single person on earth struggles with from one time or another. This is something that people who've been practicing meditation for years, even decades, still struggle with on a daily basis. So it's helpful to keep that in mind. You're however many days or however many years into your practice, and there's people who've been practicing for much longer and much more intensely that still struggle with these. And it's not about trying to uproot them completely or anything like that. It's about how can we work with them on a day-to-day basis through this consistent daily practice. And what you start to notice with a consistent daily practice is, like take tonight, for example, you did a 25-minute meditation, around 25-minute meditation. That sense of ease and relief that you gain from that meditation, maybe it lasts 10 minutes after the class is over, maybe it lasts an hour, maybe it lasts the rest of the night, if you're lucky. But chances are the sense of ease you gain tonight won't carry through to tomorrow morning. So what happens with this consistent daily practice is that this window of how long the meditation has an effect on your outlook and your attitude throughout the day, with consistent practice, these meditation moments start to weave themselves together, and you start to more consistently have that benefit from meditation. The more consistent the practice, the more consistent throughout your day you maintain that kind of meditative mind state of this equilibrium. So we're not shooting up with the highs and dropping down with the lows. We're kind of keeping a little more of an even kill. And that curve gets smaller and smaller the more consistently we practice. So that's the benefit of consistent daily practice. So what is the best type of meditation in response to anxiety? So with anxiety, the kind of meditation we did tonight is ideally geared towards anxiety. Just imagining if you're working the breath through the body, imagining the breath continually flowing down through the body. So even with the in and out breath, typically with an in and out breath, you might have that sensation of rising and falling. But for anxiety, it's better to have a sensation of falling and falling. This continue almost like the breath is a waterfall with the in and out breath, going down through the feet, deep into the earth. And this waterfall, as it washes through the body, it relaxes tension, relaxes the forehead and the shoulders and everywhere else. Sometimes the best meditation for anxiety is to go for a walk or a run first and then meditate. If we have a real excess of energy, to get some of that excess energy out before and then meditate. When I'm particularly anxious, I also like to kind of massage my ears, my shoulders, anywhere that might be tense before I start the meditation. So I don't spend the entire meditation trying to relax all this tension when it could have been done in like 2 minutes by just squeezing my shoulders. So it's just recognizing kind of where there's tension in the body and allowing the breath to continually flow downward through it. And anytime it wanders off, to always gently bring it back, not force it back. An example I often give of this is when you're trying to train a puppy, and the dog pees in the house. What you don't want to do, which a lot of people do, is like take the dog's head and force it down in the pee and tell them they're a bad dog and spank them. You don't want to do that. What ends up happening is there's a bit of an adversarial relationship that develops, and the dog or the mind might obey because it's afraid. But as soon as that door opens, that dog's running off. As soon as your mindfulness lapses, your mind's wandering off somewhere. So it's learning how, when we become distracted, to come back gently. In the same way that when training a dog, you use positive reinforcements. So when you wander off, it's ideal not to see it as a failure, that the mind's wandered off into anxiety or remorse, but instead to recognize that you're human, that the mind's going to do that. It's what it was built for. The mind was built to think. And just because you want it to stay here now doesn't mean it's going to. It has to learn that, because it's been doing just the opposite for however long you've been alive. So when the mind wanders off, you can acknowledge it as success because you've noticed that the mind has wandered off. That's much better than having an entire session where you didn't even notice that the mind was wandered, and then the timer goes off and you wake up. So to notice and to kind of celebrate that noticing, because that's actually success. And then to gently bring awareness back, relax any tension that built up during that distraction, and return to this breath, this waterfall breathing. Yeah. So any other questions or anything? So any other questions on this or anything else? Or any comments, anything that you're sitting with that you'd like to share? Okay, so in summary, if I sum up kind of my intention for tonight, it's as you're stuck at home, as you're stuck with yourself, I've personally found it helpful not to think of it as a quarantine, but more as a mandatory meditation retreat. And I know many of you that come weekly are always saying that you don't have the time for meditation retreat. Now you do. So it's a good chance to be able to really look at the mind, really sit with these hindrances, the sensory passion, the ill will, the laziness and lethargy, or sloth and torpor, the anxiety and remorse, and the doubt. To be able to sit with those things as long as it is, I wouldn't say as long as it's comfortable, but as long as it's bearable. When you notice these things come up, you can just kind of look at them for a while. You can even make them the object of meditation, contemplating or noticing what kind of perceptions or limiting self-beliefs that you hold in mind that causes these things to be so deeply rooted, and to begin to question those, even asserting the opposite to be true, to notice if it kind of loosens the grip that the hindrances have on the mind. So to be able to look at these 5 hindrances and apply this right effort, noticing when it's timely to try to approach one of these issues and when it's not, and revisiting them later. The hindrances are an incredibly helpful thing to make note of in that journal that I mentioned, making note of what gave rise to the hindrance, where the hindrance gave rise to tension in the body, being able to relax that tension, because that tension is the root in the body that the hindrance is latching onto. So with that, we'll end the meditation with a transfer of merit. Before we do that, I'd just like to say I do have some handouts, and they're down here in the description box. And there's a handout that I wrote, and then there's an essay from my teacher that I really enjoy called Your Inner Mob. It talks about the different members of the committee of the mind. Being able to perceive things in that way can be helpful. So with that in mind, we'll close with the transfer of merit. If comfortable, please join palms. May any merit gained from this meditation and discussion be dedicated to all those who suffer at this time. May all beings in all directions, without limit or end, be healthy, joyful, and at ease. May we all be healthy, joyful, and at ease. Metta karuna mudita upeka sahanga teya cetasa chaturisam bharatva viharati samba bunaro pavena samba dhammaro pavena samba sangharo pavena sonte hantu nirang karang. So thank you everyone for coming tonight. It was a pleasure to sit with you all. Hope to see you all again real soon.